Good evening to one and all present here. I am Chaital Dikshit, your host for the evening, and I extend a warm welcome to each one of you on the behalf of NUV Media Connect International Virtual Media Conference hosted by the Journalism and Mass Communication Program of Navrachna University in collaboration with Arab Open University, Saudi Arabia, and Research and Culture Society, Vadodara. Coming to the end of day one, we have an expert lecture on transformational filmmaking through positive psychology by Mrs. Sangeeta Iyer. The last 10 minutes, we will have a question session answer round. I request all the people to type their questions in the chat box. Nowadays, films occupy a significant portion of the media content consumed by the people. It is very common for the films to depict the pseudo positive psychology themes, that is, finding oneself, discovering one who really is, achieving a deep transformation, and making a real difference in life. Realizing that hard work really pays off, and discovering that love can conquer all the problems. And that's what we love about it, as it shows a part of ourselves and our surroundings. The expert lecture will be taken ahead by Dr. A.V. Ramachandran, who is the mentor of School of Science and professor at Emeritus Navrachna University. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Uh, I have great pleasure in introducing to you today's expert speaker, Mrs. Sangeeta Iyer. It gives me great pleasure to introduce her. There is something which I can tell at the end, of course, why I have more pleasure in introducing her. Mrs. Sangeeta Iyer is a multi-talented personality. Besides being a wife and a mother, she is an Indo-Canadian filmmaker. She holds a master's degree in psychology and is a certified positive psychology educator. She provides transformational teacher training and trains the trainers programs to schools, universities, and organizations with the vision of helping individuals and communities to thrive by applying scientific principles, strategies, and tools of psychological well being. She's a certified adult educator and has been an instructional designer and a learning and development expert in the corporate world for more than a decade. She's also a certified Feng Shui consultant, a board member for Basic Education Foundation, and has a certificate from the Documentary Filmmaking Institute in Canada. A filmmaker for a cause, she says, is her production house, Metal Films, was born with the idea of telling simple yet thought provoking, insightful, and inspirational stories about people and events that have social relevance. I now invite Mrs. Sangeeta Iyer to deliver her lecture on transformational filmmaking through positive psychology. Mrs. Sangeeta Iyer.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. I'm not sure. I put up the first slide asking you if you can hear me and see me, because seriously, this is the three questions we are all asking these days with all the virtual sessions that are going on. So I hope I'm audible and I hope you can see my screen, right? Good to go on? Are we good to move on? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, okay, perfect, perfect. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Bhargav Pancholi and Dr. Roby very, very much for thinking of me and for inviting me to join your very first international virtual conference. And I'd like to congratulate Dr. Roby and his fantastic team of teachers and students. It's no easy task. It's a kind of a Herculean task to pull something like this together. And you and your team have done a fantabulous job of making this experience really seamless for all of us. So thank you once again, Dr. Roby, and wish you much success with many more such conferences to come in the future. The other thing I'd like to say, I got two surprises this morning. One, that we were not doing this on Zoom, and we were doing this on MS Teams. So if there is any glitches along the way, I ask for your forgiveness in advance, but so far so good. And the warm welcome that I received from Dr. A.V. Ramachandran, that was quite a pleasant surprise I wasn't expecting. And considering he's my dad. No pressure at all right now, right? All right, let's move on then.
Just a moment. I think I was to do this at the end, but anyhow, you spill the beans and let the cat out. So I have nothing to say further. Okay.
I think many of them already know that. So, but thank you. It's a real privilege and honor for me that you are the one introducing me. So thank you for that surprise as well, Dr. Robi. And I like to start off with this quote before we kind of dive into the actual content. It's one of my favorite quotes. And, you know, we live in a time where we are all very conscious about the kind of food that we are eating, if it's good for our health, if it's,
Can
you
you
know,
make it full
nutritious,
screen?
if it's healthy. Um, sorry,
Can you make it full screen?
I
The
have,
presentation.
but we were not able to see it. That was the challenge. So,
Oh.
yeah. Are you able to see it? Okay. There's not a whole lot of typing in the other slides. There is just one quote here. I'll be doing most of the talking. So if I'm audible, we should be good. The point I'm trying to make is just kind of a mindfulness reminder that yes, it's extremely important to watch what we are eating and if it's healthy for our bodies or not, because we need to take care of our body physically. But sometimes we forget that what's really important as well is taking care of our bodies and minds emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well. And that depends a lot upon what is the kind of content that we are watching, what are the things that we are reading, uh, what are the kind of people we are hanging around with. So, just kind of a mindfulness reminder to have this holistic approach towards ourselves. Okay, let's dive right into the content. Now, since we're talking about cinema and since we are talking about positive psychology, I thought might be great to start off with a joke on positivity, right? So there was this journalist who was interviewing a gentleman, a 99-year-old man, and he was really impressed with this man. So after the interview, he went up to this man and said, "Sir, I'd really love to come back next year and interview you as you celebrate your milestone and turn 100." So the old man smiled at the young journalist and said, "Yes, of course, why not? You look healthy enough to me." So that's what we call the height of positivity, right? Having said that, let's talk a little bit about where psychology was prior to World War II. So if there are people in the audience who are psychologists, bear with me. I'm just going to do this high level for those who may not be aware. Before World War II, psychology really had three main missions. One obviously was mental health and working on mental illness. The other one was making people's life really productive and fulfilling. And the third one being identifying what talent looks like and nurturing the talent. What happened after World War II, and understandably so, that the focus primarily shifted on one priority, which was the first one, that was working on mental health and curing mental illness. And that is what we all know as traditional psychology. So we are all aware of how that works. So then where does positive psychology fit into all this? And before I tell you what positive psychology is, I'd like to debunk some myths about positive psychology that I have come across in my experience. First of all, positive psychology is not replacing traditional psychology. Uh, Positive psychology, if it's anything, is complementing traditional psychology. It's not a new age philosophy either, like many of us think. Positive psychology is not an untested self-help motivational guru either. It's not your smiley face happiness course, even though happiness is a big aspect of positive psychology. It's not Aladdin's magic carpet ride that takes you into the world of bliss. And if you read the book, the Secret, let me tell you, positive psychology is not a sequel to The Secret either. So these are some of the myths that I have come across, and I wanted to kind of clear the air on that. So then the question is, what exactly is positive psychology? Now, there are several definitions out there about positive psychology, but if I had to put it very simply for you, it is a scientific study of human flourishing, and it's an applied approach to optimal functioning. Okay, so positive psychologists have researched a number of topics that mainly center around the idea of what makes life worth living and how can we all work towards a life like that. So over the past 2 decades, a number of studies have been conducted in an attempt to understand the underlying practices for striving and thriving. And many arenas have been studied under this umbrella. About more than 16 areas of life can be examined and maximized to bring more happiness, more resilience, and just overall increased life satisfaction. So just like I mentioned earlier, positive psychology is a scientific study, and because it's a science, it requires testing against evidence. Think of it as another branch of psychology. So if you can see this puzzle in front of you, if psychology is that completed puzzle, positive psychology is a part of it. So um, the fact that you've heard of the other common puzzle pieces, or should I call branches of psychology, like cognitive psychology and forensics and clinical and social, abnormal, organizational psychology, and so on and so forth. You get where I'm going with this. Positive psychology is yet another a branch of psychology. Now, as mentioned before, during World War II and after World War II, the priority had changed, and traditional psychology was focusing on the first mission, and the other two missions kind of went on the back burner. This is kind of that mission. And the reason I say that it complements traditional psychology is kind of explained in this picture. I hope you can see this. Is what it is that if you think of traditional psychology, it predominantly focuses on mental health. And its main goal is to cure mental health. It's about fixing a problem that may be causing difficulties in somebody's life. Um, Positive psychology is the other end of the spectrum. And this is why I say that it complements traditional psychology. Now, this kind of work that traditional psychology is doing is very critical, and it's very important for the percentage of the population that requires it, which is, let's say, on an average, 20% of the population that needs this kind of support. What happens in the process is that that we are missing out the opportunity to serve the remaining, say, 75-80% of the population who may not have a mental health challenge, but they're still sitting somewhere in that middle zone, and there is a huge scope for their normal life to be more fulfilling, more flourishing, more thriving. So if I was somebody who was sitting at that -10, and if I was working with somebody in psychology, it's a little unrealistic for me to go from that -10 to +10. But what traditional psychology does is helps me get from the -10 to the 0, which is that neutral normal zone. But if I'm sitting in that 0 somewhere and I want to get to that +10, that's what positive psychology comes in. It asserts that strength is as important as weakness, and so it's important to build on the best things in life as it is to repair the worst. Okay? Now, philosophers have long investigated the nature of happiness. It was not till 1998 or so about 2 decades ago, that scientists really merged together to explore well-being through a very systematic and a very multifaceted research method. Okay, now positive psychology, that's why, has now become a very rapidly growing scientific and professional movement, because it demonstrates what individuals, what organizations, and what communities need to thrive by offering them the skills and tools that are traditionally not taught in schools. So that's a little bit about what positive psychology consists of. And one thing I always like to add and to keep in mind is that we're not talking about toxic positivity when we talk positive psychology. It's not something that's enforced either, and it's not something that's overdone. And since we're talking about the connection of psychology and cinema today, studies have indicated that watching films might prompt a greater well-being. And so then that raises the questions about, let's talk a little bit about cinema and how then cinema controls our brain because it's impacting our well-being, right? I'm hoping I am not going too fast. I'm hoping I'm audible to all. Am I good to move on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. So let me share with you a research study that was done. But before that, just keep in mind, just like two sides of a coin, for everything, cinema is similar to that. So what I'll try and attempt is kind of explore a little bit of both. Then you be the judge. I'll share with you some research that's been done by neuroscientists with regards to cinema. And then I'll share a bit about how education, cinema, and psychology kind of intersected beautifully for me, and my vision with the work I do. So, having said that, this question always remains just like the chicken and the egg. There's this question that's always asked: does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? And we could be on either side. But one thing we could all, and that it influences us in several ways. So sometimes simply watching uh, films about certain themes, okay, um, can also help bring more awareness and compassion to the challenges we are facing, to the challenges others are facing. Films can help us kind of recognize stuff. It can help us spark ideas and feelings within us. Cinema can inspire us, and cinemas can motivate us. And I'm sure all of us have felt this way at some point or time. And so that I believe is that observational learning and entertainment aspect that kind of goes hand in hand. That education can create social change is what I believe in. And viewing films in this light shows us the influence and kind of the power of cinema in a very positive way. So the research study that I was talking about, you probably heard of the classic Western movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, with Clint Eastwood. So in one such study, participants were made to watch 30 minutes of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And their brain activities were compared in an MRI machine to see how people's brains reacted and what parts of the movie were most engaging. And what researchers found is that parallel activities in people's brains was remarkably similar. So during certain scenes in the movies, the brain area activity increased in the brain areas, and in certain scenes it decreased. And at the same time, their eyes tracked the same area of the screen. So based on these observations, they were able to suggest which scenes were most engaging out of those 30 minutes. Then they decided to do a follow-up study to compare brain activity of participants with other shows. So what they did is they also made them watch an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and a real-life unedited shot of like a New York City park. Okay, and they used brain activity again to measure engagement. And I don't know if there's anyone here who'd like to guess which one turned out to be most engaging of the four. Just a guess. Any guesses? No? Okay, I'll tell you what the results were. They found that Alfred Hitchcock Presents had similar brain activity among all participants in 65% of the cortex, which is the outer layer of your brain. And then similar activity was seen for 45% of the cortex in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Only 18% for Curb Your Enthusiasm, and a mere 5% for the New York City Park, the unedited video. So it clearly showed in this study that Hitchcock could orchestrate the brain response in a very timely fashion across all viewers. And it's kind of interesting because Hitchcock has once quoted that creation is based on an exact science of audience reaction. So, I mean, obviously he knew what I was talking about. And this is just another sample study. I just want to show you how the brain scans look like. Similar shows, but one different movie in here. But if you see how the different studies are showing brain scans in different areas, and how from A to D, if you see, the first one showed high engagement. So what's been suggested for the future now is that the films in the future will be so interactive that they will respond to your brain activity while you're watching the film. So in that sense, they can be most engaging. So it's like an ultimate choose your own adventure experience. And it's a kind of bit creepy for my liking, but it gives a whole new meaning to light, action, and camera. Okay. Now, before I share some more findings on studies done by neuroscientists, I want to highlight a little bit about neuroscience so you get an understanding of what exactly they were measuring in their studies. So in the picture here, as you can see, the prefrontal cortex is called, the so-called thinking part of your brain. And that primarily deals with concentration, decision making, self-control, inhibition. So it's that area of your brain which gives you the sense of right and wrong. Now, the amygdala is part of the limbic system, and it's the so-called emotion center. What it does, it serves many emotional functions, but it can be a trigger for depression and anger, aggression, impulsive behavior, because it's in control of memory formation and emotions. So, what neuroscientists can do and are doing is they can objectively measure the entertainment value and audience reaction when it comes to movies, even TV shows and entertainment. And these results can help them define how engaging and how emotionally effective that content is. So what neuroscientists have been doing is looking at what styles of movies have maximum control over the viewer's brain. And if you've noticed today, in pretty much like virtually every aspect of today's entertainment world. So not just limited to cinema and web series, but even if you think of video games and music, what are the two things that are omnipresent in abundance? Sex and violence, right? We see that more and more in the content that's coming across. And you may have heard of a term called suspension of disbelief when it comes to entertaining. If you haven't, what it really means is that it's an intentional avoidance of critical thinking or logic when we are examining something that's not real. So when you're sitting and watching a work of speculative fiction in order to believe it for the sake of enjoyment, right? Now, Aristotle was the first to explore this concept in relation to the principles of theater. And basically, what it means is that the audience, as an audience, we ignore the unreality of fiction in order to experience a kind of release, like a purging, almost a catharsis. So, say for instance, you're sitting passively and watching whatever your favorite genre of fictional film or a web series is. So you think, hey, basically feels like a fun way to relax, forget about the day, forget about real life for a bit. What's the harm in that? But the evidence is continuing to mount that it's not all that good. A study was done by the Indiana University School of Medicine, and what they examined is young men and violent media exposure. And they found visible alterations in the MRI brain scans after only 1 week of playing violent video games. And in particular, they found significant decrease in the activation of the prefrontal portions of the brain, which is your thinking part from right or wrong, and a greater activation of the amygdala, which is your trigger for those emotions. Now, I'm not saying just because the brain changed its functioning, it does not every single time prove causation. It did in this case and in this study, but if it were all that bad, we would be dealing with millions of aggressive, violent young killers just walking around the street. And thankfully, that's not the case, not yet at least. But this kind of behavior is on the rise, so it is something of concern. Other studies were done by the Virginia Tech Research Division. What they did is they showed students several non-violent films and several super violent films. The results clearly showed them that films that are violent in nature can increase hostile behavior. University of Alabama conducted a similar study, and they came up with similar results as well. They conducted the study with a caution for parents, saying if you had children that were a bit on the aggressive side or a bit immature, that they should not have access to violent films. Okay. Another study was done by the Macquarie University Children and Family Research Center. They found that children who watch violent movies are more likely to view the world as unsympathetic, as malicious, and a scary place. And that in turn stimulates aggression. So this is again just the tip of the iceberg in terms of research findings. I did not want to bore you with too much, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what the research and the science is showing us with regards to the content we are watching, and it makes it very concerning. Okay, it also kind of goes against the belief that we had that as an audience we are just sitting there and passively observing whatever it is that we are watching, even if it's fictional, because there is a theory called the active audience theory, and probably know about it. It's a view that the audience is not merely a passive group of observers sitting and receiving information, but it's rather individual audience members who are actively involved. You and I, when we are watching, we are actively involved both cognitively and emotionally. And all the understanding that we have on the content that's coming our way is influenced by a lot of other factors too, like our belief systems, our values, culture, education, experiences, interests, etc. Right? Reminds me of an article actually that I read recently um, uh, in the Forbes by Brianna West. She did a whole research paper and wrote about it. But what it highlighted was what many people don't realize is that just as your brain is built to regulate your physical self, as does it try to regulate your mental self. In psychology, we call it as confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is about finding evidence to confirm our existing beliefs. So the idea here being, when you're watching that content, do you believe what you see or do you see what you believe? And we know that movies are a form of mass media that can have impact on behavior of viewers. So when we have repeated graphic violent scenes and gross sexuality presented again and again, it kind of desensitizes us, right? And if you have noticed, each year the media industry keeps raising the bar of gory abuse, of sexuality, of gun violence in an attempt to shock the viewers. And as these things become more and more common, and especially the concern being with the younger generation and children, they become more aggressive as they start desensitizing to the images that they are seeing. And if you think about it, no doubt the movie industry is worth billions, and it's only growing each year. If you look at statistics from 3 or 4 years ago, it showed that about 65 billion uh, was spent worldwide that year on the film industry. I mean, that's enough money to end world hunger not once but twice. So that's the kind of impact it has on us. And now with the explosion of the internet websites and OTT platforms, Netflix, HBO, Amazon, I mean, you name it, it's only becoming that much easier to access movies and web series. Personally, for me, I find that what little they can show in movies, they're making up for it in the web series. I mean, there seems to be no concept of censorship. I mean, in no kind of governing regulations in the kind of content that they're showing. Again, this is my personal view from the series of the number of web series I have seen. Here's a pattern I saw pretty much in most of them. There's an increase in sex, violence, hate, abuse, vulgarity, greed, impatience, all on the rise, is just my observation. So if you are a parent, then again concerning, and you need to talk to your kids before and after watching a movie. What's important is, are they able to separate fact from fiction? Because it may seem like common sense, but believe me, there's a lot of people out there who are not able to separate it. And we'll talk a little more about that going forward. But in my opinion, when I think of cinema, I look at it, if I had to give an analogy, I think of it as like, a puppet master and a puppet show. The puppet master pulling the strings when he's doing a puppet show. I think of cinema in the same way. Is like they're trying to move the culture in a particular direction. And we really have to be considerate of how it's affecting us at a subconscious level, because it is. And it's like our minds are being molded. It's like ideas are being suggested to us. It's like our tastes are being formed. And so we have to be very careful. Again, going back to the quote at the beginning, what are we consuming mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? And is it good for our overall well-being? That's a question we all need to ask. Um, Carrying along the same lines, and if I'm too fast and if you need me to pause, just say something. Otherwise, I'm going to assume I'm good to go. I'm going to introduce this concept. Not sure if you heard it, but it's called Schadenfreude. Um, Schadenfreude is a German term, and it's two words, Schaden and Freude. And Schaden basically means damage or harm, and Freude means joy or pleasure. So it literally means, experiencing pleasure or joy or self from witnessing troubles, failures, and humiliation of others. Pretty mean, right? And it is. So, Schadenfreude is about that part of the brain that gets turned on when we are rewarded at someone else's expense. I'm not talking about lighter moments that we have with friends and family, where we make fun of each other or we joke. I mean, those lighter moments are very important in life. Those laughs and fun moments are. I'm talking about the more malicious and immoral kind of pleasure that people derive. And what researchers have found is there are three driving forces behind Schadenfreude: aggression, rivalry, and social justice. So, from the aspect of films and cinema, not all is bad, especially the social justice angle. It's not a bad thing, but the other two are along the lines of malicious and immoral feelings. And I'll talk first about that. So we watch this condition or mood called Schadenfreude, which has psychological and social roots in several films, and it extends to TV programs, and for sure, if you've seen that in reality shows, it's fed on the weaknesses of people, right? It's in how feelings are displayed. I mean, disagreements, contentions, jealousy. There's this, very tense and rivalry kind of atmosphere kept alive in a lot of these competitions. The contestants are kept under pressure. Their mood changes quickly. You notice symbolic violence and Schadenfreude appear in the backhanded compliments of the competitors who are criticizing each other, people talking to each other in a very condescending way. You may have also seen Schadenfreude in the behaviors and expression of jury members and presenters, because it kind of becomes this part of this whole big spectacle that they're trying to create. Similarly, violence, disaster, and misfortune, they are becoming very, very familiar parts of our entertainment in films, in web series, and even into television, video games, and sadly extends to cartoons as well. So this is happening in very different forms, be it insults, humiliation, verbal abuse, physical abuse. And what's really sad is not only are they becoming acceptable formats, not only are we just tolerating it, but maybe we are even fueling it. Because if you just look at the ratings of some of these shows, if you look at the box office number of some of these films, it's giving us a clear picture of where we're going as an audience as well. So not only is this presentation of Schadenfreude, I feel, a big problem, but the fact that as an audience we are taking delight in watching it, to me, is a whole another problem. Now, for the good aspect of Schadenfreude, which we call the social justice angle, this is that aspect of Schadenfreude. And it's kind of funny. It's very fun to say this word Schadenfreude. Try it. When you say it again, you want to keep saying it. I've already said it 10 times. Sorry. One aspect of Schadenfreude when it comes to violence in cinema is justice oriented. So, your typical good guy, bad guy in the film, and then the bad guy does all these mean things, and the good guy suffers. We all feel very bad about it. In the end, the bad guy gets what he deserves. He's either punished or whatever it is. And at that moment, we as an audience, we experience Schadenfreude. And that is because we feel that fairness has been restored, justice has been served. So that's not so bad. That's kind of the good side of Schadenfreude. But basically, what Schadenfreude is, it's giving us pleasure, And remember, the brain will always choose pleasure over fear every single time. So even understanding now why you feel what you feel creates an advantage, an opportunity to respond more thoughtfully than impulsively going forward. And as we are looking and talking about Schadenfreude, I want to highlight again the aspect of what we call stylized violence and gross sexuality. And some may ask, why is that a problem? Is it a problem watching violence on screen? It's, I mean, after all, it's fictional. Not really. You know, it's a personal choice. Some of us really enjoy watching that kind of content, and some may not like it at all. And that's a very personal choice. And honestly, that's not even a debate. What is debatable is that this kind of content on real, is that translating into behaviors in real? Is it impacting society, the content that we are watching? Because that's where the challenge is, and that's where the discussion needs to happen. And the question I ask is it necessary for us to stylize violence, right? Is it necessary to make it look so cool even if it's fictional? Okay, so the point I made earlier on was about how some people are not able to detach themselves, from fiction and fact. And so again, just a quick reminder on that it's extremely important for us to remember that we need to be mindful. We need to be able to detach from whatever content we are watching, um, because for those who can't, it's critical to see that, hey, this is fictionalized. At the end of the movies, people who are depicting these violent scenes just pack their bags and go about their normal life without facing or doing any harm. Now, those of us who can detach ourselves from whatever we are watching and recognize that, no issues. But then there are those who are not able to do this, and they have difficulty detaching, and they end up experiencing cognitive dissonance. So it's all this information that's coming their way, which is completely contradicting their existing beliefs. Okay, and kind of helps shape their biases and perception. And because filmmakers utilize a lot of violence, sexuality to elicit emotional response from the viewer for entertainment value, it becomes that much more for us to be mindful. Another aspect is sensation seeking, stimulation. It's this emotional, visceral, chemical reaction that we may experience when we are watching something like this. It's very sensation seeking. So imagine when you're on a roller coaster ride, or whether it scares or jumps in a film of horror or suspense, when something very visceral and unexpected happens, it can provoke kind of an adrenaline, in us. And it's interesting because when you think of studies about people liking spicy food, these studies have shown that even if it inflicts a kind of pain within them, there is an element of enjoyment because it's very, very sensation seeking. So again, just being mindful of that and knowing that even if it's sensation seeking and stimulating, that should not equate to the desire and intent to harm others, okay, in real. So that's about one side of the coin that we talked about of cinema. And now to go to the other side of cinema real quickly, this is the part I highlight, is what I connect with most, is that cinema, I feel, really can, you know, create a stronger society. Cinema can not only make us feel good for the 2 or 3 hours that we are watching it, but it can actually help us make better. And they need not be always the feel good films. It could be a difficult film to watch, but it could certainly, if it gets you thinking and changes you, then that's the important aspect for me. And yes, times have changed, which is why perspectives have changed. And so cinema has to change. We can't be the same. And for a lot of people, cinema is a commercial enterprise. Let's accept it. A lot of people are in the business because it's a commerce and the intent is to make money. Fair enough. Cinema is also an art form. We know that one of the most popular art forms. And I'm sure we hear all the time, when it's said that, well, we can't confine art, cinema is art and we can't limit it. And I believe because of all these privileges that cinema also has a profound impact on society, it comes with a responsibility. And so personally for me, there is nothing artistic when you show extreme violence and gross sexuality. And not only do you show it, but you glorify it. Also, this is not about, pretending that these things don't happen in society, that we are not saying let's hide these issues, let's not talk about it, right? Let's just brush it under the carpet and it'll go away. No, that's not what we're saying. What the intent here is, if the idea is to create awareness and education and also entertain people, all that can happen without stylizing it, without making it look so cool, because there are people who are taking that and transferring it to the real life, right? And as a filmmaker, no matter how big you are, as a filmmaker, and no matter how small you are, someone like me who's an independent documentary filmmaker, and everybody in between, I think of us as Spider-Man. You know that famous line from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So the question that each filmmaker has to ask themselves, are we selling entertainment at the cost of value? And then it's their perspective from there on, whatever the answer is. Now, the other side of the fence, as an audience, I and you as an audience, we have options and choices too. We can demand better cinema. We can insist on more meaningful cinema while still keeping the entertainment and fun aspect very intact. I personally miss the days when we could sit with family and watch shows and movies. It practically feels impossible to do that now because I'm always worried about what language will come out of their mouth or what scene will pop up on the screen. I don't watch any of that stuff with my kids anymore. So we have that responsibility of not watching it and asking ourselves, are we fine replacing values, aesthetics, morality with vulgarity, cruelty, aggression? Because, after all, it's just entertainment. Because a good movie has the potential to capture a trifecta of meaning. They can be enjoyable and entertaining, empowering, engaging, all at the same time, right? So it is up to us. Do you want to change your brain for the better? Because these things are impacting our brains. And so far as my personal journey goes, it's been a beautiful intersection of education, cinema, and positive psychology for me, because that's all my background. And I finally found a way to bring it all together. I am channeling my energies and focus on bringing positive psychology in the field of education formally, because I'm already doing workshop and speaking engagements, on filmmaking, positive psychology, leadership, soft skills, and even feng shui. But I'm bringing positive psychology formally in the field of education. I just last week wrapped up designing a brand new diploma in positive psychology. Actually, this is the first time I'm sharing the news here because I just finished doing it. And I intend to start offering this diploma online because if COVID has taught us something, it has taught us that virtual learning is quite possible. So I'm also in conversation with organizations and institutions if they are interested in offering this diploma for their students and team members, because the goal of this course is to share strategies, share tools and techniques that are backed by science to help individuals thrive, to help individuals flourish and increase their well-being. So whether you're a student, a journalist, you're a filmmaker, a professional in the corporate world, whether you're a teacher who's shaping minds, you are an entrepreneur, a coach, mentor, a housewife, this diploma gives you the tools and strategies that you need for your well-being. And when it comes to cinema, I am trying to bring positive psychology as an element in every film I make from now on. So the first film that many of you may be aware of, Gurukul, the documentary that we made, it's been really encouraging for an independent filmmaker like myself because the response that we got is overwhelming. And even in the last 1 year, it's already been recognized in 7 film festivals globally. So India, Europe, Canada, US, and we're still waiting on hearing from some other film festivals. I just heard from a TV network yesterday that they're interested in featuring our documentary. We've managed to win some awards too, Critics' Choice Award and Debut Filmmaker Award. We won the award for Outstanding Achievement Award in Educational Film category. So all that extremely encouraging for me because I wasn't sure if the audience is ready to take in this kind of content, but it tells me they are. And it's really encouraged me. I've already penned down 2 more scripts in the last year. We're just waiting for permission to go on floor and start filming. Both these films again have a concept of positive psychology ingrained into them. Okay, so that's a little bit about me and how the intersection came along for me. If any of this interests you, if any one of you feel like getting a hold of me, getting in touch with me to know more about the courses, the films, anything at all, here are some ways to get a hold of me. I am still on a very sharp learning curve with social media. I'm taking the help of my son, but I got onto Facebook over a year and change ago. I've just got onto Twitter and Insta, and I'm quite enjoying learning it. So the best way to get a hold of me on Twitter and Instagram, pop me a message. I'll know who you are, so I can be in touch if you want me to be. And you can check out our website, medalfilms.com. What's also in progress is another website, medaleducation.com. It's still under construction, thanks to a dear friend who's helping me out to build this up. It's going to feature more about the diploma course and other content that I offer. And then we're also coming out with our YouTube channel very soon. So that's a little bit for you in terms of if you need to get in touch with me, this is the best way. And before I kind of conclude my thoughts, I just wanted to leave kind of some food for thought for all of you. And before anyone asks me a question, is positive psychology the answer to all of society's problems? Of course not. I'd be lying if I said that. But really, I feel that isn't it time that we all start asking ourselves that if we start applying this science of well-being and thriving into education, into business, even into government and politics, if only we could start building on our strengths, if we could ask others to do the same, and if we could focus our attention on striving and thriving, and if we started channeling all our energies into, um, what makes life really worth living for us? Can you can you imagine the possibilities? That's really what I wanted to say. Leave you with to kind of ponder over. And considering how difficult the last year has been for the entire planet and a lot of challenges for many of us, some more than others, it's really given us time to reflect and be thankful for what we have. I just wanted to leave you with this exercise that has been tried and tested in a laboratory setting. It's already been tried and tested by many positive psychologists in their sessions. I have used it personally in my workshops, and I have done it too. And it's a wonderful exercise, especially considering the year we've had. In talking to a lot of people, I felt like a lot of people have lost this hope and focus on the future. They're not able to set goals. They're not able to look in the future. So this exercise, it's not mandatory. Um, you can do it if you feel like it. Give yourself 20, 30 minutes in a day where you're not going to be disturbed, where you're by yourself, and then close your eyes and envision yourself in the future. Ideally, we say envision yourself 5 years from now, but if it's really difficult for you to do that right now, envision yourself 1 year from now, and think of everything that has gone beautifully in your life. Think of everything that you wanted in life that has come true, and then start answering these 4 questions. What are you doing? Who are you with? What is your life like? And how are you feeling? Once you answer these questions and write a detailed description, okay? So you want to do this for 20 minutes each day for 3 days in a row. So do it continuously for 3 days at least and include as many details as possible. What we've found over and over again with this exercise is it increases optimism, it increases your levels of happiness and overall well-being, and it has also helped reduce a lot of depressive symptoms in many people. So something I wanted to leave you with. And thank you all for your time. I really hope you got some value, something out of it as a takeaway. I guess I'm here for the next few minutes to answer your questions, if any burning questions, comments, or I would even like to hear some key takeaways for you. And yeah, I'm all here. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Mm, okay.
Yes, sir, if you want to.
No, no, no. I just said thanking Tankita for her talk, and then I think the talk is open for discussion if somebody wants to ask questions.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, ma'am. There is a quote I would like to address for your journey. The key to realizing a dream is to focus not on the success but significance, and even the small steps and the little victories along your path will take on up to a greater meaning. Definitely, ma'am, we were aware about the traditional psychology, but how the positive psychology came into the picture is what we learned today. The most beautiful line I thought was that weaknesses and strengths, both things are equally important. You have covered all the points right from the traditional psychology that was there during the World War One, neurosciences, and different comparative studies. Though it's a real life in cinema, but as a human, somewhere we try to practice it in our real life too. I The last important thing was that definitely like any family movies we definitely want because it's an entertainment source, but somewhere due to the vulgarity and any words we are not able to see. So that is the most important change that we are looking forward. Ma'am, we all are mass communication students and we are really happy to see your documentary, The Gurukul. So congratulations, ma'am, and thank you so much for your time. Now we are open to all the questions. The participants can just unmute and ask to ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Calvin, and I have a question for you. Um,
Calvin, I can't
ma'am,
see you. Is your video off?
uh, I'll enable my.
Thank you. It's nice to see your face
Yeah.
when you're talking.
Can you see me now, ma'am?
No, not really.
Calvin, just tell your designation and university also, please. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah. My name is Calvin, and I'm an independent scholar now. I have done my graduation in. I've done my masters in English from Christu Jayanti College, Bangalore. Ma'am,
Wonderful.
my question to you is that you told us two sides of Schadenfreude, but what about movies that walk the boundary, like Taxi Driver? So after watching the film, one person he tried to do what the character did. He tried to assassin.
Yeah.
So when Ingmar Bergman was asked about this, he said that the director cannot be blamed for what happened. So the movie actually is not making violence cool, but it has few things that very important things like it's dealing with the issue of loneliness and also how people are made heroes without thinking. So how can we then judge which violent movies are bad and good for us? So it's interpret. So if we apply reader response here, and what about the surreal movies? So movies of Alexandro Jodorowsky, which has violence, which is not to disturb, but it is to disturb. Violence is to disturb rather than make it look cool. So this is
Yeah.
my question.
Okay, great question, Kelvin. What do you think? I'm going to turn it back to you and ask you first because you kind of answered your own question while asking the question. So, before I answer that for you, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Ma'am, I think it's more about uh, psychologically we cannot say because we cannot control psychologically control people. If we were to psychologically control people, then maybe artists would have been able to make movies that they wanted to make. But I think it's something that cannot be blamed on the artist. Um, Also, I think when we do reader response, ma'am, there is a problem there where we cannot actually distinguish between a good violence and bad violence.
Absolutely, you're right. I think it's twofold, and I think somewhere in there, when you were asking the question, you kind of answered it. It goes both ways, I feel. So, as a filmmaker, I strongly believe that I have a responsibility. That's just my personal opinion, right? Am I stylizing violence, or I'm just showing violence that exists in society, and it's a reflection? It's two different things. Am I making it look cool? And by making it look cool, is it impacting people? Am I seeing a trend? So we can take control of how each one of us takes it individually, but like I highlighted earlier, it's important to kind of make sure that we are detaching ourselves, right, from the content that we're seeing. But the trend I'm talking about is that not many are able to. So it's a very fine balance. Is you can make people aware, you can show people what you want to show and what's happening in society, or even fictionalize it a bit. But don't make it sound so cool. Don't stylize it so much that there are young minds out there who are getting impacted and thinking, wow, like this is really cool because I want to be like this. Does it make sense, Calvin?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
So my what I highlight is don't stylize it. Don't make it look so cool. That's it, because it's impacting a lot of people. And we couldn't say that if you and I just looked around in society. I had to dig into a lot of research to see there is this trend, and it's a very scary trend that we are seeing. And I'm talking more about the recent web series that I have been watching, and it's like, wow, that is on the rise every year. Won't you agree? The kind of violence and sexualization is slowly on the rise. It's like they're testing the audience. Oh yeah, okay, they accepted it. Let's try a little, go one notch up. So the idea is, one, we as individuals need to make sure that we are separating fact from fiction. We are not letting it impact us. But if there is so much content coming at us, now even video games and music and the lyrics in the music, it's everywhere and it's on the rise. So that's like an alarm bell which I wanted to raise, just to be aware.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for your question. Great question, Kelvin.
So we can have the next question. So I guess we don't have any more. So thank you, ma'am. Coming to the end of day one, I would like to admit my thoughts that a good event never ends in the world. They just take a pause and keeps us awaiting for the next. With 2 more days of conference, we have a lot of things planned. So once again, thank you everyone for joining in this session, and thank you Dr. A.V. Ramchandra for your valuable time. Looking forward to meet you again tomorrow at sharp 11 a.m. And also, if you're sharing anything on the conference on the social media, please don't forget to tag us at NUV Media Connect and use the hashtag NUV Media Conference. Thank you so much.